There we go. We got you, Councillor Bevan. I think we have everybody here now that needs to be here, so I will call this meeting to order. Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for the February 16th, 2021 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? Councillor Chouinard will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Can I get a motion, please, that the minutes of the February 2nd, 2021 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? Councillor Wilkinson will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. We have no public hearings tonight, but we do have a delegation. We have Kathy Rose here today. So Kathy Rose Solutions pesenting to us about a project that they are working on here in the Edson area. I'd like to welcome Mr. Dick Brown and Jacqueline Peterson from their organization to present to us here this evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much for having us. So I'll just share my screen, correct? And
absolutely.
I think let's check and see if we can get this to work. Excellent. All right, so again, thanks so much for having us here today. My name's Jacqueline Peterson. I'm a senior analyst at Catheros Solutions, and I'm here with Dick Brown, Catheros's president and CEO. So Catheros is an oil and gas service company that completely eliminates methane venting from remote well sites. And we're here today to introduce ourselves and our company and to meet you all, if even virtually. So Catheros is currently in the process of trying to build out our distribution network, both through various government funding opportunities, as well as developing relationships with oil and gas producers in this region. And your support really means a lot to make this happen. Over the next few years, we're hoping to significantly increase our services here in the Edson region. And we're grateful for a few minutes of your time to tell you a bit about our technology and the services we provide. So in the next few minutes, I'll speak briefly first about methane venting and the challenges currently facing oil and gas producers in the region. And then I'll turn it over to Dick to speak about the technology itself, the benefits it provides. And then I'll close by going over some of the positive impacts we hope to have on the community. I've included a copy of this presentation, by the way, in the agenda, which also includes our contact information. And I'm more than happy to follow up on any questions you might have, either after this presentation or at a later time. All right, so why is methane venting a problem? The climate change impact of methane is significant, with methane being 25 times more harmful than CO2. In Alberta, the oil and gas industry is the largest emitter of methane, with over 3/4 of methane emissions in the province coming from upstream oil and gas producers. So to tackle this issue, the province of Alberta and the government of Canada have committed to reduce methane emissions by 45% by 2025, which is pretty an aggressive goal, I guess you could say, through regulation as well as other policy tools. But this is a really challenging problem for lots of oil and gas producers who rely on venting methane on their remote sites in order to operate necessary pumps and valves and what have you. And just to get a sense of the scale of the issue, there's over 100,000 remote well sites in Alberta, with over 10,000 remote wells here in the Edson area alone. So the scale of the challenge is really significant. To date, solutions for this problem have been relatively expensive, cumbersome, and kind of challenging to maintain, leaving many producers, very rightly concerned about the impact these regulations will have on their competitiveness, especially in light of the economic challenges the industry is currently experiencing. So we at Catheros are pretty excited to have developed a technology, which Dick will describe here in a minute, which presents a very affordable and innovative solution for producers who are seeking to reduce or even eliminate their methane venting in a cost-effective way. So Dick, I'll turn it over to you right now to give a bit of an overview of the technology.
Okay, thanks, Jacqueline. And thank you so much for giving us the time to speak with you today. And again, seriously appreciate the support that we get from the town council in the area. I think to start off, so people really understand the significance of what's happening in and around Edson and across the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin. And in the US, it's 4 times larger a problem than it is in Canada. First, need to understand what a pneumatic device is. And what that means is it's a device that's driven by air or some type of gas. And so at a typical well site, oil, gas, and water come up the well bore, come to surface. And in areas where there isn't a power grid, so there's no electricity, so in the Edson area, the 10,000 locations that Jacqueline referred to, in those areas, you take, what the companies do is they take high pressure methane gas off of the wellhead, and they use that gas as an energy source to operate their valves, run their pumps, and other devices at the actual well site. And then every time they use a pump or turn a valve, that the gas that was used, the pressurized gas that was used to operate it, then vents into the atmosphere. So it's an understandable and it's a controlled vent. So that's the challenge that we're trying to overcome with the significant methane emissions in Alberta. So what I have a history in industrial gases. So I was a founder of a company called Ferris that built out nitrogen and CO2 infrastructure across Western Canada. So I have a very close understanding of industrial gases. And I have a good understanding of the energy industry, having worked in it for many, many years. So what the solution basically does is we use, instead of the methane that's at these well sites, we bring in basically liquid air. So there's 10 large air separation plants from a variety of manufacturers that take air as their feedstock, and they reduce the temperature in it until it starts to become a liquid. And then ultimately at minus 196, nitrogen, which is the largest component of air, turns into a liquid. And so that's what we're using to basically replace the methane. It's used in other industries extensively. And one of those industries, that the picture that Jacqueline was on the last page, was at a hospital site. So if you go by a hospital, at least some of the larger hospitals, you'll see these nitrogen tanks that exist. And so in those tanks, there is liquid nitrogen that's being held. Like those tanks are like a thermos, a very well insulated thermos that holds the nitrogen at minus 196 degrees. So what happens then, on the next slide, you'll see it's a very simple procedure where we just have a tank that is a cryogenic tank. So it holds very cold liquids, and we just let nitrogen do what nitrogen wants to do. So liquid nitrogen really wants to become air again. And so in the process of that, what we do is we just tie into what the methane lines were going into the well sites and turn those off, and we replace it with the nitrogen line that comes off of a tank. So that nitrogen line, as soon as that nitrogen leaves the tank, it becomes air, and it becomes air at a very high pressure, and it completely eliminates the use of methane that was being used. So nitrogen itself is an inert gas, so it's well understood in the energy industry. So it's very simple in its use, and it's being supplied right now from 10 plants across the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin. And Those 10 plants have been built out over the last couple decades to service an energy industry, which, as you know, the number of wells has considerably dropped. So there's an enormous excess of liquid nitrogen potential on the market. And so all we're doing is we're just marrying the production of liquid nitrogen with the actual usage at the well site. And so if you think about a propane business, how you have a truck that goes out to a location and then once or twice a month, or even longer, fills up that tank that's being used, that's the exact same model that we're using. So a smaller distribution tank full of liquid nitrogen comes out to the different well sites and fills them up as the nitrogen is being used. So just to keep this in context, we're talking about an enormous number of sites, but it's very low rate. So the actual emissions are low, but when you start to add them up, they can become significant indeed. So what we're doing, like I say, is nothing new to several industries, but it's new to the energy industry in the application of eliminating methane. So what we did was we partnered with Velvet Energy that has a strong presence in the Edson area. Their production there, along with their other partners and other operators in the area, where there's no power located, there's no ability to be able to compress air directly to be able to use. So we came up with this patent pending process where we have the liquid nitrogen tanks. The tanks that you see here in this picture are were put together by the Catheros team just to be able to replicate what a commercial product would look like that you saw at the hospital or other locations like that. We installed it in September, connected it into the methane system, turned off the methane going into these wells, turned on the nitrogen, and they've been running flawlessly since. Even during conditions like we saw over the last few weeks, where at these locations, the temperature had dropped during the evenings to -42 on a couple evenings. And of course, with liquid nitrogen being stored at -196, even at those really cold temperatures, as soon as it's released, it wants to become air again. So as far as the wells were concerned, there was absolutely zero issues. And there has been very few issues, if any, really, over the last several months of the tests. So now with this being a successful test, we're working with Velvet to go to a larger scale project now, which includes 10 or 20 locations or 30 wells. And we're reaching out to all the other producers in the area to see if they want to participate in doing the same thing. With the carbon credit processes that exist in Alberta, the ability to be able to install these and run them and operate them at zero cost to the producer makes it for a very compelling solution. So the one thing about this that is beneficial is it's very, very simple. Anybody who's worked in the industry on well completions is familiar with nitrogen. The systems themselves have no moving parts. So they're highly reliable. It completely replaces the methane and emits no CO2 at site. And because of it being highly reliable, but also it doesn't need solar power, batteries, and such. Because we're only dealing with a tank, it really is very affordable to be able to impart this solution. It's easily scalable, and I'll give you an example of that is our partner, Chart Industries, who builds these particular units, the ones that you would see in hospitals, built out, they have 80,000 of them in operation right now, and over 10,000 of them were installed last year at these remote hospitals that had just popped up to be able to deal with the coronavirus. So they're able to do hundreds, 300 to 400 tanks per month. So you can do a pretty serious job of addressing the demand that's potentially there and allowing it to be easily expandable.
Great. So there's a number of community benefits also, of course, associated with this service that we believe would directly impact Edson and the surrounding region. So, of course, we're hoping to create support jobs in the region, particularly in the Edson region where there are so many remote wells that are located. And we estimate that for every 50 wells serviced, 8 new positions will be created. And again, this is in the context of thousands of potential remote well sites in the region alone. This will also indirectly support industry jobs by allowing oil and gas companies to keep costs low while meeting their environmental objectives and meeting government regulation, and even potentially benefit financially from this service, given the capacity to generate and recoup carbon offset credits. Also important, of course, to the region are the direct environmental benefits that this system potentially provides to the region by eliminating pollution associated with methane venting. And just to put this in a bit of context, our field test data shows that a single remote well vents an estimated 890 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. So with over 10,000 remote wells in the Edson region, this amounts to about 8.9 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And again, per year. So this number is equivalent to the emissions of close to 2 million cars, again, on an annual basis. So it's our hope here at Catheros to make a very significant dent in these numbers by working with you, the community, as well as local oil and gas producers in the region. So we really do appreciate your time today to hear more about Catheros, as we hope to expand our services in the area, and we'd love to answer any questions you might have. And we just really look forward to staying in touch and building a presence in the community in the years ahead. So thanks again.
All right, thank you, Ms. Peterson and Mr. Brown, for your presentation here this evening. Certainly was looking forward to this, and we were very happy to provide a letter of support before Christmas as a part of this project. I think it ties in nicely with some of Council's strategic priorities. So I'll open the floor to questions. Council, do you have any questions you'd like to ask of our presenters here this evening? We will start with Councillor Wilkinson.
Oh, thank you very much. And through the chair, I'd like to thank you for the explanation. I really appreciated this. I don't work in the oil and gas industry, so it's always interesting to find out different ways that we're looking after our environment. Now, I know I must have just missed this, but how do you keep it at minus 196 degrees? What power source do you use to get that refrigeration part down?
So we don't use any power source. If you think of it like a Yeti coffee mug on steroids, basically, there's two. When you look at the tank, there's actually two tanks. There's an inner tank and an outer tank.
Okay.
And in between those two tanks, there's a vacuum pulled. So that means there's no transferring of heat at all. So it sits in the tank at minus 196 and won't start to pressure up for a very long time. And because this is you take gas from it to be able to run the devices, as it does build pressure because of it starting to get warm, then that gas is just taken off and used in those devices. So that's the beauty of this, is you never really need to any power or any source of energy to be able to keep it cold.
Sorry, could I have a follow-up question through the chair?
Go ahead.
I guess, how does it become minus 196 in that truck that delivers it then in the first place?
So what these 10 plants that I referred to that are air separation plants, they take the gas or the air, and then what they do is they compress it and then let the pressure go on it, which causes the gas to get cold. And they do that over a few cycles, and it eventually brings down the temperature to minus 162. And that's when oxygen liquefies. And so they'll use that in the medical industry and food industry and such. And then all the other gas, the nitrogen, then they just need to bring it down a little bit colder and it becomes a liquid.
And they do that by compressing that again?
Yeah, they'll compress it one more time, and then it will turn to a liquid.
Okay, thank you
But it's
very much.
actually hauled at ambient pressure, so it's at normal pressure that it's transported.
Okay,
All right,
thank you very much.
Councillor Byer, and then Councillor Chenard.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I certainly enjoyed hearing about that, and I spent quite a few years operating in the oil and gas industry locally in a few of these remote wells. I did have a couple questions. Is there any reconfiguring of the well sites that's required to change discharge lines on the pumps and dump valves that would require, I guess, capital costs?
Right. So there is a cost to tie into the systems. It's a few $1,000s to be able to take the tubing from the nitrogen tank over to where the gas lines were historically being used. So we use the existing lines that are at the well sites, but there is a cost just to tie in our lines into that. And there's another valve, which basically just turns off the methane.
And go ahead with the follow-up, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. One more question through the chair to Mr. Brown. So from my experience, sometimes there are leaks within a system on site, right? Whether a dump valve is open and then it's discharging maybe overnight or something's gone wrong. Are there any kind of built-in alarm systems to prevent the nitrogen from bleeding out onto the well site and then the operator shows up with an empty tank?
Yeah, there is. Our systems have advanced telemetry on them. So what happens is, like I had mentioned, the 800 or the 80,000 tanks that currently are deployed in different industries, they have the same kind of systems where we monitor basically on a minute by minute basis what the volumes are in the tank. And if there's anything that goes offside, there's critical alerts that we would see. So we would know that in the morning. But it would take a lot to be able to empty a tank of nitrogen and shut a well in.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Chenard, and then Councillor Sorensen.
Okay, hi, through the chair, thanks for your presentation. My question is similar to Councillor Byers. There's obviously a cost involved, and with the economic times, how long would it take an oil company to recover the cost of setting this up? Because you mentioned they get money back through their carbon cost recovery. So I'm just curious, if they set up, how long would it be before they got their money back and maybe started turning a profit?
Yeah, so based on the carbon credit generation, it's 1 to 2 years of recovery. But what we offer is also a rental system where there's zero cost down. So we do the install costs, and so the operator themselves aren't deploying any capital. But to give you a perspective on the differential of carbon credit, if nitrogen costs about 45 cents a standard cubic meter, and at the current carbon credit cost at $40, it's about 75 cents a standard cubic meter equivalent. So it doesn't take long before these actually become profit centers on an annual basis.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Sorensen, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Brown, I believe. I'm just wondering if there's any provincial grants or incentives for the capital cost to switch over, if the province is considering anything like that. I understand there's carbon credits for the operational side, but I'm just wondering if there's any incentives to make the jump over. Thank you. Great presentation, by the way.
Jacqueline, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I might take that one actually. Yeah, so as part of this really ambitious timeline to reduce methane emissions essentially by half in the next 4 or 5 years, the provincial government has made available, and the federal government, a number of incentives to try to facilitate this movement. There are a few with the through the federal government has quite a large grant program at the moment, although it's actually not a grant program because they will essentially pay or finance the costs of these transitions for oil and gas producers, but the costs need to be repaid without interest. So there is a slight benefit for that. The provincial government does have a number of various grant incentive programs, especially directed towards, facilitating innovation in the field. And we reached out to Mayor Zahara last December. We're currently in contention, I suppose you could say, for a large provincial grant funded through the tier system. So basically right now, when the province collects carbon credits, it goes into this tier fund, which is then theoretically used to mitigate the costs and accelerate innovation in the field. So there's various grant programs associated with that. They all have very specific kind of criteria and qualification criteria. There's some that, target assessment, like baseline assessments, things like that companies can apply for funding for. And we're more than happy to work with companies too, to try to, survey this landscape, because there really is a lot of, policy incentives, I guess you could say, to try to facilitate this transition. It can just be somewhat overwhelming, and also many of these programs aren't necessarily optimally designed for all needs, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I would just comment that the one that we've applied for, which we're due to hear back into the week or next week, which we had the support of the mayor and the town council, was for emissions reduction Alberta. And the grant was focused on the Edson area. So it's to take 60 locations, which would have the equivalent of 180 wells to 200 wells in them, and to transition those into zero cost. And so just so you understand, that program itself is the first of its kind in the world. And it will bring an enormous amount of attention to this Edson area as we can demonstrate the zero emission capabilities of this.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Councillor Curry, and then Councillor Beyer.
Thank you. My question was just more in a general sense. How has the uptake in the community been? I know you're working with the one company. Has there been good uptake and the desire to move forward?
I'd say there's quite a desire to move forward. We have just finished our testing, and I think a lot of companies are waiting to see how these first 3 wells have turned out. And now that they have shown to be successful, the outreach is starting to become much more aggressive with any other funding that we get from the government.
Perfect.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bevan, you had a question. I'll go to him first because you already had a question there, Councillor Beyer. Councillor Bevan, I think you're muted.
Oh, not muted.
Oh, there you go. Can't hear you. There we go. Try again. Okay, you're on. You should be good to go.
Systems and that, like the nitrogen is a dry. Have there been any problems with the seals and the valves or anything else drying out compared to, like a solar or a regular gas and that? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, I sure do, actually. We've been doing a lot of testing with that, and all these seals and elastomers, they are actually tested and quality controlled on nitrogen themselves. So nitrogen is an excellent medium for them. Now, what happens and what we have seen in the field is when you apply nitrogen, which is very dry, to a pre-existing location that's been using a rich gas, basically, then water and such will go into the seals and cause them to swell, and then the nitrogen dries them out. So what we've done with all these locations is put in the new seals to start, and we have never seen a problem since.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
The other question was, the nitrogen displaces the air if you have a leak in the buildings and that. Do you guys supply any kind of alarm systems that if the building is depleted of oxygen and that the operators don't walk in and get knocked down like you do with an H2S or whatever and that?
Right, yeah.
Or is that up to the companies?
Yeah, so what we've done with the ones that we have in operation with Velvet is just like this. Remember, the current system is on methane, which also displaces air. So they have controls in place, and they have their safety protocols that ensure that the buildings are safe to go into. So what we've done with each of them is we've applied an oxygen monitor that tells the operator outside if there's any deficiency of oxygen at all. So that's one point. The second point is nitrogen is quite a bit lighter than air. So if it does release in a building that has a vent, and all of these buildings do have vents, then it releases through the venting at the top of the building. But just to be safe, the same monitors that the operators use are the same monitors that they use to check on the oxygen levels also. So they seem very familiar with it.
Okay, well, thank you. I did check up on your guys' pages here. I've been involved in the industry since '69. So new stuff comes out, I'm always on top of it and reading it. So I like where you're going. So good job.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Byer.
Thanks. Another question through the chair to Mr. Brown. I hope that you're going to get a large uptake with the local companies. I know the one I worked for was often having test sites of new technology. So it was really interesting to always be a part of that and be able to go to those sites and train and learn as required. It doesn't sound like it requires any additional training than what a regular operator would already have. So that's good. A question though around the separation plants in Alberta. If you did have a large uptake in companies wanting to go on with this and they're successful with it and they want to continue, is there any bottlenecking with finding the nitrogen supply or transporting it to our locations?
Yes. So what we would have to do, as far as increase in demand, for every 60 wells or so or locations, we need to build a new dispensing vehicle, so a truck that actually delivers the nitrogen. As far as the production at the plants themselves, it's not a problem. And the reason why it's not a problem is because the only source they need for their plants is air itself. So obviously it's abundant at the plant. So what they do is as they get to full demand, they add an additional train, and that additional train then just takes more air. So the plants, as long as there's the demand, they continue to add the trains. So what they have done historically is added a lot of trains. So the price has never changed on nitrogen over the last 20 years since I've been in the business. And that's because it's too easy to make. But there's an excess right now, and that's because it built out for nitrogen fracking and other uses in the energy industry, which have now gone to slick water. So there's this huge amount of nitrogen that's available even before new capital would have to be deployed. But these plants exist clear across the globe. Whenever there is a shortage in either oxygen, argon, or nitrogen, they just add additional facilities to address it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that probably wraps it up for questions here this evening. So thank you very much for your presentation, and please keep us informed as the process goes with the tier funding and as I mentioned earlier, this really ties in nicely with our strategic priorities of environmental stewardship, as well as creating jobs and employment and innovation. So thank you very much. And the only question I have before I let you go, are you going to be presenting to Yellowhead County at all?
Not that I'm aware of, Jacqueline. I don't.
Yeah, we don't have anything planned yet, but we're hoping to, yes, reach out. We have reached out, electronically, virtually to a bunch of the elected representatives in the area. We haven't reached out yet to Yellowhead too, but I'm hoping that they're interested in hearing about this.
All right, sounds good. Obviously, the well sites are located in their jurisdiction, so I'm sure they'd be very happy to hear a presentation from you. So thank you very much. You don't have to stick around. You can log off and we'll continue with our meeting, or you can stay if you want some entertainment for the rest of the night.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Can I get a motion, please? The council enter into the 2-year extension of the revenue sharing agreement with Yellowhead County. And oh, look at the hands go up. Councillor Bevan will make that motion. And we have any questions, comments, or concerns? Ms. Bittner, do you have anything new you want to add?
Not really. I think we've discussed this the last couple of meetings. We just need the county passed it last week. This is just us formalizing our side of it.
All right, thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please? The council approve the notice of decision with respect to development permit application number 011-2021 and the legally described as the plan outlined in the memo. Can I get a motion for that, please? Councillor Chenard will make that motion. And I believe we do have Ms. Darling here to speak to this, or Mr. Ham.
Good evening, Council. So at the last committee meeting, we discussed all of this and 2 questions arose. The first question was related to the setback requirements for the residential development versus commercial. To answer that question, setbacks for residential zoning for a parcel that has alley access is 2.4 meters on each side. Commercial zoning does not require a side yard setback. The second question was regarding the materials allowed to be used for accessory buildings. And to answer that question, the accessory building exterior should be consistent in respect to color, finish, and texture to the principal building on the parcel. Were there any other questions?
All right, any other questions on this for Ms. Darling? Councillor Bevan and then Councillor Curry.
Yes, through the chair. I see right now they have a building sitting there by their house and that. And obviously they want to make it bigger than what is sitting there right now. Why would they not just use that is lined up with the house and the proper setbacks probably if it went through our office here? Why would they just not replace that and make it look like the house in that? Because right now you don't notice it that much sitting there. It's kind of dilapidated, but if they replaced it, then they'd have themselves a proper building instead of going out and doing this.
Mr. Ham or Ms. Darling?
Through the chair to Councillor Bevan, I agree.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Curry. Councillor Curry.
I just want to clarify this material. So it is a different material and it doesn't match the primary. The color doesn't match that they've applied for.
Through the chair to Councillor Curry, that is correct.
Perfect. Sorry, I meant to say through the chair to you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Chenard.
Through to the chair, what I'm seeing here is obviously, like we're hearing the questions, this is probably economics. They need the storage building and they are putting up temporary because a tent don't last forever. So I would understand that's why they're not building. This is a temporary measure due to the economical times. Would I be correct?
It's a permanent building, is it not, Mr. Ham?
through the chair to Councillor Chenard, it is a permanent building engineered. It looks like its intention is a permanent structure, but it isn't safe to assume.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? So I've reviewed this. I've thought about this since this came to committee last week. I've visited the location. I stand by my comments from the last council meeting or the committee meeting. We have certain criteria that we like to see in terms of development. This is a direct control district. I have major concerns with a structure like this in this area. I think we should be concerned about what this will look like in 2 to 3 years from now, or if there's a change in ownership. And I just don't think it suits with what is there existing. But that is just my opinion. So I will not be voting in favor on this. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, it's through the chair to the mayor. You know, I agree with you on the same thing. I was out there and I took a look at it and I thought if they replace it or whatever and put the proper siding on everything else, you have your housing across the street on each side and everything else, and that I think they can come up with a better idea that would look aesthetically pleasing to be in that neighborhood for years and years to come. And anybody coming off a highway or down the highway would also see it. So I think I won't be voting for it either.
All right, Councillor Byer.
Thanks. Through the chair to council, I share the comments that Councillor Bevan made and Mayor Zahara, and I don't think that it's the right suit for that area aesthetically. And I think the land use bylaw comment with the external finish of the principal and accessory building should be reviewed for consistency with respect to color, finish, and texture is the main reason for that I won't be voting in favor of this. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. I see no other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion defeated unanimously. Thank you, everyone. We have no information items. We have no sundry items. We will go to council committee reports. And we are going back to February the 3rd. And I will start today with Councillor Byer.
Thanks. I had a short week. February 9th, I had the Emergency Management Advisory Committee meeting. Following that, the Committee of the Whole meeting. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
On the 5th of February, we had an Evergreens Foundation meeting for the full day. It's very exciting that Hinton's Lodge, they have all the modules put in place now, but they have to finish them, of course, but that design build has really gone very well. Our good news was that we received $2.25 million from the provincial government for Indigenous capital housing projects. And this is for our build in Grand Cache, where we're going to build senior lodges on the cooperatives. We will be trying to go to CMHC to get federal funding for it, and we're sort of hopeful, 80 to 100% covered, we hope. Now, after this, it's sort of hard to say, but we are struggling with our revenue because we have vacancies in many of our lodges. COVID has had a huge effect on this. There's many people just not willing to move during this time with COVID. They're very nervous to move into the lodging. So the managers are working very hard to try to get them filled, but they don't have right now. We did also receive other funding from the provincial government for updates at Heatherwood Manor and Heritage Court, more to do with health and safety issues there, just to keep things updated. On February 9th, I also had the emergency management meeting and then the Committee of the Whole. On the 11th, I was registered for Brownlee and I didn't go because of helping a friend, but I did get all the materials. If you'd like them, I think I could share them with you. One is on municipal management of watercourse and drainage, which I thought was great for our West End. Tax incentives, we've already done lots of those, but I think they'd just be good ideas to share. So let me know if you're interested. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Chenard.
Okay, I'm here through to the chair. I had a short week too, Committee of the Whole on February 9th. And then I attempted a Trans-Canada meeting on the 12th, got booted out, come back in. So about halfway through the meeting, once I get the highlights, I'll pass them on. But that's it for my report.
All right, thank you. Councillor Curry.
I also had the emergency management meeting on the 9th and the committee of the whole.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Same thing on the 9th, the MAC meeting and the committee of the whole.
All right, thank you. Councillor Sorensen.
Thank you. Through the chair, on February 9th, I had the Emergency Management Advisory Committee and the Committee of the Whole. That is it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. For myself, on the 4th, I had the AUMA Town Hall on policing. This is one of 2 meetings that are being held, another one's later this week, talking about the Police Act review, some of the provincial government's ideas on moving to a provincial police force. And we'll be having further discussions on that here later this week. Quite frankly, it is mind-boggling that they're pursuing this in the midst of the economic situation we are having in the province. This is going to be a very expensive endeavor. It was not a high priority on the Fair Deal panel. It was something like number 24. They have requested a whole bunch of information from municipalities. I can tell you many are refusing to give that information. Others are willingly. We'll be looking at seeing what we're going to do here administratively. So we'll see where that discussion goes. They're currently in process of doing a report on what that would look like here in the province of Alberta. Without question, all police forces have their issues. The RCMP has many issues, and then we've had concerns over the years, but from a financial point of view, it just does not seem to make any sense to any municipal leader when you're looking at this sort of thing. So it was an interesting discussion, and I look forward to future discussions on this later this week. Also had a conference call with the Premier regarding COVID-19 and talked about, they're trying to manage this, all kinds of different demands and perspectives, kind of like walking on a high wire, it was described, where if they make some wrong decisions, all of a sudden our case counts can go up. So there's a really some concern with the variants and what's going on there. So they've come up with their plan and seem to be sticking to it for the most part. We'll see what happens here in the next couple weeks. Locally here, our case count has stabilized, which is great to see. They did mention that if they are going to a regional approach, it will be via health zones and not municipal boundaries. There were just too many issues with people, one town's shut down, the other one's open, so you're just moving the problem around. So and as of right now, the North Zone on a per capita basis has more cases than the urban centers. So that these are some of the things that they're battling, and Alberta still has, on a per capita basis, one of the highest case counts here in Canada. So it's actually ahead of Ontario and Quebec on a per capita basis. So lots of discussion about things like household rentals, lots of pressure to see that happening. As well as looking at things such as reopening gyms more fully, things of that nature. I don't know, Ms. Bittner, if you have anything you want to add on that. I know you were on the call as well.
No, I think you've captured, I think, most of the concerns that people had. It does go around the household rentals and reopening more.
Yeah. So there was that, the EMAC on the 9th, CAL on the 9th, and then this morning, West Yellowhead Community Futures hosted a BSN meeting, which I presented at. Councillor Bevan was there as well. Unfortunately, we didn't have any business owners that showed up to it, but we did have a representative from one of our local banks there, and we just reviewed some of the plans and programs available. So that was disappointing that nobody took advantage of that, but we continue to try to engage, and we do have these supports available. And that's my report. All right, we have no financial items. Steve, do we have anybody on the line from the media?
Your worship, no, we have nobody in attendance tonight.
Nobody in attendance. All right, thank you. No closed meeting session, so I will take a motion for adjournment. Councillor Chenard will make that motion. All those in favor? Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night.